Welcome to the Winsome Creationist, where we explore God's world using a model building approach, interact with a gracious tone, and take a firm stand on the literal truth of creation found in God's Word. Join host Steve Schramm and occasional guests as they explore the mysteries and majesties from creation to the flood, Babel to the cross, and everywhere in between. And now, here's your host.
Hello, my friends. Welcome into another episode of the Winsome Creationist. Hey, this week I have for you an interview that actually I recorded a while ago on my old podcast, and I wanted to resurrect it because it's a fantastic interview with my friend Pat Mingarelli, who is a creation enthusiast and a photographer, and knows just a lot about God's beauty and exploring creation, and he's so passionate about nature. And so in this conversation with him, we talk about objective beauty in God's creation and just being able to get out and experience God's creation in better and deeper ways. So I hope and I pray that you enjoy this particular episode. If you're watching on YouTube, this one's audio only, so there's no video. And you'll forgive me for that, I pray. And we'll be back in a couple weeks with another fantastic episode for you. Have a couple great interviews lined up in the can, and I'm excited about getting those out to you. All right, God bless, and I hope you enjoy this interview with my friend, Pat Mingarelli. All right, I'm pleased to have my friend and co-laborer in ministry, Pat Mingarelli, here on the podcast with me. Welcome, Pat. Thanks for joining me.
Hi, Steve. Good to be here.
All right. I'm super, super excited about this. We're going to be talking about beauty in creation. And I'm not going to give you any spoilers because I'm looking forward to Pat just diving into this here in a minute. It's going to be really fun. But hey, Pat, why don't you first off just tell us a little bit about your ministry? Of course, you can give us, links and all to it. But just tell us a little bit about, what you do, why you do it, and why you think it's, important.
Okay. Well, give you a little, background is I am a professional photographer. I have been fascinated with photography all my life. I was back as a kid, I always wanted to take pictures. And when I was 8, 9 years old, of course, there was no digital cameras back then. And my mom wouldn't let me take pictures, but eventually got my own little, like you can't, once in a while she would, but most of the time she didn't.
It's funny.
And finally, I got a camera for my birthday, and it was, just a little black box with a hole in it. It didn't even need a battery. That's pretty much what it was. There's an old 110 camera. Maybe some of your listeners will recognize what that was. And by the time I was ready for high school, I was a senior in high school, I got my first 35 millimeter film camera. And I started taking a class in high school, knew I wanted to go to college for that. And so I went to a 2-year art school first, then I went to a journalism school, and I got a degree in photojournalism, worked for a few newspapers, and then a Christian magazine. I worked for a Christian magazine for a long time. It was called Worldwide Challenge. It was part of what's called Crew now, but at the time I was with, it was Campus Crusade for Christ. And I was a photographer for that magazine. Way back as a kid, I first had this budding interest in photography. I had this budding interest in nature and wildlife and things like that. And that time I dreamed of being a nature photographer, which kind of got me moving in that direction. But as I said, I wound up in journalism. And as a journalist, the magazine I was with would send me places to document Christian ministries and what was going on. And I'd always find myself where I had some downtime. I'd look for the local nature preserve or if there was a national park or state park, I'd go there and take pictures on my downtime. One time I was doing a beach ministry photo shoot, and I was done with the shoot. There were some girls doing evangelism on the beach, and I was photographing that from a distance. And then I just started to photograph seagulls, of all things. But that's where I was. So anyways, I've always had this call back to nature, call to the wild, with trending word this time with the new movie out. But I decided to God was calling me to celebrate him as creator. through photography, that those of us who know God would know him deeper. And for those who do not know God, that they would come to know him. And I started something called Wild Heart Photography. It eventually led into a speaking ministry called The Creation Speaks. And that led into another ministry as a side that I really focus on now, called the Visual Bible Verse of the Day. And I'd like to say, and I have this on my website where I talk about I'm an experienced professional photographer, and I'd like to say an outdoor enthusiast, and I help people connect with God through my nature photography and, of course, his word. I do this so they may better understand his power, his majesty, and authority. And that's kind of what the website does. And it encourages and inspires people on their daily walk through God's word and God's creation. So,
yeah, that's great. What a background.
Yeah, sorry, I gave you a little. I don't know if you wanted all that, but
that's wonderful. That's super helpful to kind of get a window into your world, and what a worthy calling I think that is. I mean, you kind of I got a sense there for just having that kind of that itch that needed to be scratched. When you're going out and doing this stuff for work, but then you take a minute to go off on the nature trail and grab photos of your real passion there. I mean, that's really amazing. It's really beautiful. It's an awesome story, and I'm glad that it seems to me that throughout the life of the work that you have done throughout your professional career as a photographer, that God's really been able to use you for different things.
Yes. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of run this website now, the Visual Verse of the Day, and that's where you're placing basically your Bible verse along with a photo and a couple little thoughts basically every day or every weekday at least, right?
Yeah, 6 days a week.
6 days a week.
Symbolically don't have one comes out on Sunday as a Sabbath symbol, but
sure.
Also gives me a rest from.
I understand.
When I can, I try to do them ahead of time, but such is life. You can't always do them ahead of time. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's absolutely great. And for anybody who's been following the work that I've done for any number of, any period of time, I've actually had Pat do a couple guest blogs on our website, steveshram.com. So I'll put those links in the show notes along with a bunch of links to different things that Pat does and things that we'll be talking about today. And so I'm excited to dive in. So what we're going to do here is dive into to some thoughts that Pat has on beauty in creation. And if I can just, maybe introduce the topic a little bit. It's a difficult thing. I was telling Pat before we got on to the call here. It's a difficult thing for some people, and I'm one of those people, to objectify beauty. And not that I don't think it can be objective, and not that I don't think it is objective. I actually think it is. I just couldn't really give you a good argument for it right now. Maybe I need to study more. But that's one of the things I think that Pat is going to really, really talk about, how there's this idea of beauty in nature that is something that would not really make sense on a kind of naturalistic worldview. It's something that seems to require that there was a creator in nature. So I'm going to interject my thoughts here and there, but Pat's the expert. So for the most part, I'm going to kind of let him run with it and tell you all just about the beauty that we see in nature and the beauty we see in creation. So take it away, Pat. It's all you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and feel free to interject if you want to have me talk on something a little deeper or
sure.
Catch your mind. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, as I began to spend more time outside, I just kind of gave it to you in a nutshell, but there's a lot of time that I spent outside. And I began to realize as I was taking this journey, or even before I took the journey of celebrating God as creator, I realized that God speaks to us through his creation, and the creation speaks to us about God. And it declares to our heart, soul, and mind things about God. And when we spend time in creation and we study it and we enjoy it and we think about God in it, we can grow in our knowledge and worship of God. And one way, as I mentioned, creation speaks to our heart. And I believe just to kind of touch on the other ones where I said the heart, soul, and mind, which is what I began to explore as I started this ministry called The Creation Speaks, and then the visual verse is that when creation speaks to our mind, it does so through what you really touch on in your website a lot, is through science and through philosophy. We see that design in nature, and it's obvious that we see it. And when we're honest, we'll see that design. Even atheists they'll use the word design. I remember there's a quote by
Dawkins, right?
Is it Dawkins or I get them? Dawkins, about if we see a design, we have to. That says something about seeing the design in nature, but we have to put that out of our mind because there is no purpose or design to it. Something like that. It's Stephen Hawking's or Richard Dawkins, one of them. If I get the names right there, I get them mixed up.
Yeah. Well, I forget the exact quote here, but what Dawkins said, and I might actually have it here. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing it, but basically what Dawkins said. Here it is. Biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. And then he kind of goes on to argue that they were not actually designed for a purpose. They just appear that way, which is okay. Yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, the design, it speaks to our mind. It tells us, there's got to be somebody there. So creation speaks to our mind, and then it speaks to our soul through God's word. The Bible mentions, there are a lot of verses about, everybody's familiar with Genesis. Well, all believers are familiar with Genesis, and how it talks about God's creation. But the Bible actually talks a whole lot more about creation beyond the pages of Genesis, and God's interaction with it and God's design with it. So creation speaks to our soul when we read about it in the word of God. I actually have a devotion that I'm working on that's beyond Genesis, and it's examining scriptures on creation beyond the pages of Genesis. So there's that. The Bible's rich with metaphors and God's hand in creation. It's all over, especially in the Psalms and things like that. So
actually, I think some of those verses that are, as you say, beyond Genesis, some of those verses are more descriptive about the nature of creation and in the way that it kind of interacts with in the way that we interact with nature. And I mean, Genesis is great, I think, for learning about how everything came to be, and even somewhat of the purpose of it. But the rest of Scripture has a whole lot to say, as you said, about the nature of creation and how we interact with God's creation and how it tells us more about God.
Yes. So there's a lot there. And so it speaks to our soul. And in the last area, as I mentioned, it's heart, soul, and mind. So the heart, I believe, is the predominant way creation speaks to us. We don't need to have a large knowledge about science to know that creation's telling us something about God. I mean, it wasn't until the last 50 years that the common man got to know science and Genesis and things like that. But hundreds of years ago, people didn't know science, the average person, but God spoke through his creation. It's when we, see a bee or a butterfly on a flower and something speaks to our heart about God, or when we hear a clap of thunder, and that just is a tiny, tiny touch of the power of God, and that's under. Or it's when we go to a national park or stand on a mountaintop or a hilltop, and we see this vast beauty and majesty of nature, and it speaks to our heart about God. And so beauty speaks to our heart and tells us something about God. And today we want to say that, I don't know exactly how old the quote is and where it comes from, but we all hear it, that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And that's really not true. That's a myth about beauty. And it actually tells us more about the beholder than it does about the beauty, because it tells us more about the person who thinks something is beautiful than what the object is actually beautiful.
Huh.
So
That's a good thought.
yeah. And so beauty is more objective than that. There's something about it. It starts, the Greeks used to say that, when they had a better idea of beauty, talking about proportion and order and things like that, which were part of beauty. And if we really want to know what beauty is, we have to start with God. God is the author of life. So he's the author of beauty. Because if we're looking at what beauty is, because if beauty is in the eye of the beholder, then what is beauty? I mean, some people, beauty might be a car. Beauty is in a face, or beauty is in a sculpture, or beauty for me is in nature. So what is beauty? I'm not too much into thinking a car is beauty, right? But I'm thinking nature's beauty. So what is there? So if we're going to start with God, he gives us a strong foundation of what beauty is. And when we dig a little deeper into that, when I teach some photo classes on composition, I like to tell my students that beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is a mathematical formula. People are like, what? Because I always thought it was in the eye of the beholder. But there is something called the Fibonacci series, or the divine potion, which is a number sequencing that turns out into a beautiful image. And it starts off, it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, and it keeps building from there. And it's an Italian. The Greeks knew about it, but they couldn't put it all together. But there was an Italian monk who actually figured out the formula, and his name was Fibonacci. And it's in all things that we see as beautiful. There have been diagrams on people's faces that you could go on online, say beauty diagram face Fibonacci or something. Look those up, and you'll see the lines, how faces are measured out. Even Leonardo da Vinci and his now it's escaping me, that the man, it's something man with the guy with the outstretched hands and arms and legs.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's escaping me too, but I know what
It's
you're
called
talking
man.
about. Oh, is it Renaissance Man? It's not Renaissance Man, is it?
He's the Renaissance man, but there's when I teach my photography classes on composition, I say it and I just can't come up with it right now. And I don't want to say the wrong thing, but that is all about the Fibonacci sequence. If you look at that picture,
Vitruvian. Something
like that.
Yeah, Vitruvian Man. Yeah. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but I'm saying it like a
Vitron or Vitruvian. Yes. Yeah. So that's that. If people could go and look that up, they'll see he's playing with those numbers, and you can see how math is actually part of beauty, because it's part of it is proportion and sequence and
yeah. Just to dive in on that a little bit. That is a very prominent feature. I mean, I do the work that I do primarily outside of ministry work, and I do some IT work, but is website design, and so I'm big into design. And a lot of people call this the golden ratio. It kind of is.
The golden ratio is another name for it. Yep.
Yeah, it does seem to be. I find it very persuasive that it seems to be this kind of this pattern that you observe all over nature, and it's no surprise that people use this in design to create objectively beautiful things. I mean. It's really amazing. Actually, just the other day, I listened. It's an incredible piano piece on YouTube. What somebody did was they took the Fibonacci sequence and they mapped chords on the piano. They mapped notes on the piano to the numbers and basically just played the sequence. So they matched notes on the scale to the numbers in the Fibonacci sequence and played it on the right hand, and then on the left hand they would come back and do the harmony over top of it. And it was just, to say it was objectively beautiful almost doesn't do it enough justice. It was absolutely the most gorgeous thing I've ever heard played on a piano. So I really think there's something to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Recently, I followed the Breakpoint podcast, and they recently did something on a violin player in a subway. I wish I should have. I didn't think of that when I could have brought that up and looked at it a little better about how the beauty of this in a subway. It was kind of interesting. But going back to the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio leads into the golden spiral, and the golden mean. The golden spiral is what we find in the typical example given in nature is the nautilus shell, but it's also in the sunflower. When you see if you look at a sunflower, a garden sunflower is actually a lot of tiny little flowers called florets, and they spiral in this golden mean spiral. And so does a ram's horn and so many other things in nature. And because the golden ratio, mean, spiral, all that works in a spiral, but it also works straight in a linear line. When I give my photography classes, I show a picture of an elk, and I show how the elk's legs are all in this proportion of Fibonacci, from the ankle joint and the different joints to the hip and to the knee. And then I also show how the elk from head to tail is in that same proportion. And when we look at this elk, everybody's going to say, wow, that's a beautiful animal. And it's because it's all in these proportions, and it's really quite amazing. So it is everywhere. And God, being the author of all life, designed that and put that into things to some people like to say it's the fingerprint of God in all creation. So it is in the things we see beautiful, that's in there. So it's objectifying beauty. So, yeah. And when I say we have to start with God, because he is the author of all life and all things and all creation. And the Bible, calls him, it says the beauty of the Lord in Psalm 27:4, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to meditate in his temple. So if God is beautiful and the author of all things beautiful, then real beauty is something way beyond what we see with our eyes. God's not physical, so he doesn't possess a physical beauty. And in the end, beauty is not physical. What we see as beautiful with our eyes is just a representation or a shadow of what beauty is truly like. It's pointing us beyond that. When we see, it's kind of odd when we see a beautiful person, a beautiful woman, we think, wow, she's got to be awesome. And we base this on a physical appearance. Yet we know that's not true, because you see, like, some of the most physically beautiful people in the world are actors and actresses, and they usually have terrible marriages because there's, so beauty is often only skin deep. Now that's, that's something we could say is true when it comes to physical beauty. It's often only skin deep. But why is it that when we see the beauty of a person that we think they must be an awesome person? Because really in our heart, we know that beauty is imprinted on us from our Creator, that beauty is something deeper. Like when I see a beautiful picture of nature, either my own or somebody else's, I think, wow, I want to be there. I want to sit there because it's beautiful. But then again, I'm forgetting about the bugs, and it might be cold, or it might start to rain, or whatever or that there might be a mountain lion about to attack me there or something like that, because that's forgotten because we see the physical representation of beauty, but is actually pointing us to something deeper than that physical representation.
That's a really good point, I think, because I mean, I'm just thinking in my own mind. I mean, just to be a little honest, I mean, of course, I think we all could say that, we might look at one person and might look at another person, and, one person in our minds, right, is like, maybe ugly, and the other one is beautiful, like to us, right? But it could be, so there's the physical representation, but then, I mean, it could be that beyond the physical, the one who looks beautiful really isn't all that beautiful, and the one who is ugly, so to speak, really is beautiful on the inside. And so it does seem to be that there is this superficial layer that needs to be peeled back whenever you're considering whether something or someone or whatever is actually beautiful. And so it does seem to call to something beyond just what you can see with your eyes. I think I agree with that. It's still hard for me to process, but I think I agree with it.
And when we're asked the question, what is beauty? Everybody can kind of get an idea of what beauty is in their head, but then to simply define that is a bit more difficult.
Yeah.
If you ask people to write down their definition of beauty, if you ask people what they think is beautiful, they'll come up with examples. But if you ask for the definition of beauty, you're going to be all over the place. People are not, even what people think is beauty, when they don't really have a true grasp of what beauty is. And we've kind of lost it in art today. In arts, art has become something called self-expression. I mean, they're really knocking it down to just that. They're self-expression. And that's not what art is. Art is based on this beauty that we could find. Yeah. But so much today about art is the shock value of it. And that's not really art. Art's not shock value unless the shock value is, whoa, that's amazingly gorgeous or beautiful. But there's this crazy thing at our zoo. I live, outside Omaha, Nebraska, and the Omaha Zoo is actually quite a zoo. It's people don't realize it, but it's one of the top 5 zoos in the world. And I won't go into how they come up with that, but it's an amazing zoo. So, but there they have these art things that some Japanese artists did, and they look like a combination between a human, a rodent, and a bear. And they're all painted crazy. I don't know if there's like a half a dozen or 10 of them around the zoo. And Omaha has a lot of, people don't realize this, Omaha has a lot of money. And so there's a lot of donations, and someone probably liked this art. I'm sure they were all donated to the zoo by some guy who thought they were whatever, but they're ugly as snot. They're in our zoo for called art. And they're just really bad. If you want, I could send you a picture of one later, and you could, but they're just really bad. And, but some of them are grotesque or disgusting, but people think they're art, and that's not art. Again, art is about beauty and proportion and equal and balanced and having an order to it, because God is a God of order, and He's the author of beauty, and that's, and symmetry is in there. It's all part of what is deemed beautiful, because God is a God of order, and so we see order in nature. So we know that God is a God of order. Creation apologists do a great job of saying how God is a God of order, and we can't even reason about science if God doesn't exist, because reason is a form of order and logic. And without God existing, how would we know what order and logic is? Because he's created that. And we could see that order and what really is truly beautiful, what everybody will agree on is beautiful. We'll see that. And God put so much into it in his creation. He created out of his glory and his splendor. And the great theologian Jonathan Edwards, he actually wrote a lot about creation and God's hand in creation. And, he lived, what's almost coming to be 300 years ago. But he said that God had created out of an extension of his glory. And God didn't just simply to create. He created out of who he is. And the God that made the creation, God made in Genesis was truly a reflection of his glory. And creation still does this today. It's still a reflection of a very creative God, a God of glory. And God doesn't make junk, and junk doesn't reflect God. God makes magnificence, and he puts his glory into it. Creation today is still magnificent. The creation in Genesis was even more magnificent. And we think when God didn't create junk, well, how did he create us then? We're made in his image. And so how did he make all of us? Everybody's got God's beauty in him, even if they don't choose to exhibit that. But he's created us and God's magnificence is in us. And that's,
I think that's a point that really shouldn't be missed or glossed over, because, so many people in the world today are just, broken, like really broken people, and really people who take themselves for granted. And you see this where people don't think that they are, in a deep sense, beautiful. And a lot of times for them, they've defined that in an inappropriate way. They've defined beauty as looking a certain way, as opposed to beauty being made as an extension of God's glory, as an extension of God's beauty, but just being made in his image. And that is something in itself that is objectively beautiful, that to be a human person is to be an imager of God. And
yes.
And this is why, again, some people don't maybe communicate this appropriately, but this is why, to be a naturalist, the person who feels, not beautiful, the person who feels as if they're deeply flawed, if something like naturalism is true, then they have every right and every reason to think that could be the case. But a Christian worldview provides you with something there that makes what it means to be human more meaningful and beautiful objectively. And so a Christian worldview offers hope in that way. Yes. That other worldviews just can't. So what I'm getting at is this is important from a very practical standpoint.
Yes, it is, because when we see that, even when we look around at nature, which is awesome, and we think about the God that created that, he created us too, and we're not junk. We're created. People may have a low self-esteem, but when they, or whatever, the psychological mumbo jumbo or whatever, when they say that stuff, but when we reflect on who we are in God, and that he created us and he created this world, if he created this world, how did he create you and me? And I'd like to say that God has a purpose in nature. We see that God, and this is kind of a little bit off of the beauty, but God has a purpose for every leaf that falls from a tree. It breaks down, becomes part of the soil, and then it's used again. If God recycles that and has a plan for that, well, then he's got a greater plan for those who bear his image, and especially those who believe. We have purpose in that. We have, he's created us for a reason. We're not junk. And going back to this world, the way he designed it, he designed it, he meant it for us to take pleasure in it and to enjoy it. Of course, we had the fall, it kind of ruined things, but not completely, because God's greater than the fall. So he created this world to please our eyes and to stir our hearts, to draw us to him. We have, there's something in creation that calls to us, tells us something about our purpose, our original. We were originally designed to live in a place of beauty, creation, beauty of God's creation, and God would be there. And that place was Eden. And the closest thing we have to Eden today is nature. And so it's written on our hearts. And so we pick up, God touches us through that, because that's what we're originally designed for, is a paradise. And we eventually live in the paradise of heaven. We're called to that. So, I have a lot of stories on, just a lot of examples in my life of being an outside, and to the point about beauty. I was in Glacier National Park with a friend of mine, and he and I were hiking through to a place called Grinnell Lake. If people who've been to Glacier National Park, they might recognize the name Grinnell from Grinnell Lake and Grinnell Glacier. But as we hiked, it was just through part of it was through the forest, and it was just amazing. And it was a little bit, it was not far from the lake, so it was somewhat of a landed forest area, and it was just alive with buzzing and chirping and flowers, and it was just all alive. And then finally we got to the lake, which was kind of sitting in a mountain bowl, if you're familiar with that kind of feature and geological feature. And my friend went off in one direction, I went off in another, and we were just going to spend time with God there. And I took out my journal and I began to write, and I was like, God, why did you make this beautiful? And I was like, evolution really doesn't have any good example for beauty. Good reason for beauty. Why would there be beauty if it was all just random chance? And I began to play with these thoughts, and write about them in my journal. Why would God create beauty? Why would evolution come up with beauty? We know God creates beauty to point me to himself, but why is it we long for beauty? Why do we desire the beauty of a person, or the beauty of art, or the beauty of nature? And I began to play with these thoughts, and evolution really doesn't have a great answer for this. Why on earth would we long for something that is a result of random chemical soup? Why would we long for this thing? Why would we long for this beauty? Why would there be any beauty at all? Beauty with our eyes, beauty with our ears. Why would there be any?
That's a really good point. I was just thinking, I pulled it up here while you were talking. There's a wonderful book that I did a series on when I first started this podcast back in 2017, called Searching for Adam, Genesis and the Truth About Man's Origin. And it is a bunch of different people collaborated on this. The general editor was Terry Mortensen over at Introducing Genesis. And one of the chapters, and I'm not going to go back and look it up. I think it was written, I think it might have been written by Stuart Burgess. And I'm not entirely sure about that, but I think it might have been. He is an engineer from the UK. If this is who wrote this chapter, he is an engineer in the UK. And one of the things that they talked about in this book is called purposeful over design. And I really think, so I actually was just back a couple pages. It is right. So it's chapter 12, Human Anatomy, Unique Skills and Beauty. And it was written by Dr. Stuart Burgess. And one of the things that he talks about is the purposeful over design of man. And basically the point, the general point that is made is that humans seem to be created. And again, this could be applied to other things, But humans seem to be created with something that goes well beyond what is needed for mere
Ah,
survival.
yeah.
So, evolutionary thought is okay, well, things happen because this is what is needed to survive. And so it's like the book says, the term purposeful overdesign is used to describe how humans do much more than just survive. It's to see how it's designed with a high degree of functionality. And he goes on to talk about how this is mentioned in the Bible. And he goes to give examples, the unique, skillful hands of humans, and also. There are the unique fine skin of humans, and there are all these things, that unique facial expressions. So there's these things that he goes through in the book to talk about how human beings in particular, because he's an engineer and does a lot of engineering with respect to biological systems and such. He has pointed this out, that it's like there is way more here than what is merely needed for survival. And this is evidence that there was over design, that there was design with an intended purpose that goes beyond the mere need to survive. And so I think that's a great point that you brought up there.
Yeah. The whole beauty of nature is an over design.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like, why, sure, there are like flowers, the colors of flowers and the smell of flowers helps attract insects, but there's other ways they can attract insects too. Well, if the insect has to eat, for one thing, I mean, it's just, but it's more than I'm not a bee. I don't need to see a flower as beautiful, or it doesn't have to smell sweet to me. Why did God even make our food sweet? It tastes good. I mean,
it's 10 o'clock.
There's things like that. That's all I would say. That's all part of that over design that he's mentioned. And he's placing it to desire beauty. And why did he do that? That's a complete over design, except if the beauty is, especially the beauty of nature, reveals something about God to us. And God is much as a God of beauty. And we really long after God. Even if we deny that, as Romans 1 would tell us, that many people deny that, but it's there. And we long after God's work, and we're created in God's image. So just as God created beauty, we desire to create beauty because we're made in his image. And that is the cornerstone of any art. Is that we want to create. There's some drawing that's done to be descriptive and, to you might want to show what something looks like, but then to create something that's beautiful, that's a desire within us to do that. And because being part of us, and as I said earlier, eventually desire to live in the beauty of heaven.
Right. Man, that's a beautiful thought. Very good.
So, and getting back to Genesis, I think I've heard that before. Back to the beauty of Genesis. As I mentioned, God, created as Jonathan Edwards, an extension of his glory, and he designed the world to please him and to please us. We have to remember that God created the artistry and the beauty with a purpose. And his plan was that we would live here. The beauty we see is a reflection of God's imagination, his infinite imagination, because we know everything about God is infinite. So his creativity, his imagination is infinite, and the beauty and also all of nature reflects this creativity and diversity within God. And he created the beauty to show us. He created the beauty to show us who he is and to draw us to him. Think about it. What kind of mind, what kind of God would create such magnificence? I mentioned earlier about the colors of a flower. God created that. It doesn't have to be beautiful to me. Or in sounds of nature, a wolf's howl. I don't know if you ever heard a howl of a wolf, but it is very a majestic sound that is so audibly pleasing to us. Why does it need to be or an elk? I don't know if you ever heard an elk bugle. Same thing, just very beautiful sound. It doesn't have to be that way. I've camped in Colorado in the fall, and at night we could hear the elk bugle, and it's very soothing. One time I have a photo experience in a blind here in Nebraska. We have every it's going to happen soon, for about 5-6 weeks, but every spring we get this migration of these birds called sandhill cranes. They come through, and there's like 400,000 to 500,000 of them just flopped here in central Nebraska. Near Kearney, Nebraska is where they're at. And they're probably starting to show up slowly by now, but I wanted to go photograph them. And there's some organizations that'll have blinds placed by the Platte River where they roost at night. And you could pay to be in the blind to get great photographs as the birds come in the evening, and then they'll leave in the morning, and then you get pictures of them in the river and all sorts of things. But you're stuck there overnight because they don't want you to get out because you'll disturb the birds. So you have to sleep there. You're just like you're camping. And the blinds are have room for that, not much for 2 people. But staying there overnight, you heard cranes all night long. You couldn't get away from it because they were there. They, even though, 80% of them were asleep at any one given time, the other 20% were awake, and they were making their vocalizations. And it was so soothing that you could fall asleep to it. And why does that have to be that way? It's just like crickets. Most people think crickets are soothing. There might be someone else out there who doesn't, but most people think that noise is soothing. I love in the fall when we start turning the air conditioner off here and have the windows open at night. I love listening to the crickets. Yeah. It's very soothing. It doesn't have to be that way. And God, John Eldridge, an author, he wrote this book, The Sacred Romance, and he talks about how God romances us through these things. And calls it the cicadas on a tree. He mentions the sunset, the crickets, and God is romancing us through nature's beauty.
Oh man, that's a good thought. I love. I have not read that one. I've read, or I'm reading actually, when I can, Desire by John.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
The Journey of Desire. Yeah.
And it's a wonderful, he's really got some insight into that. Another example I was thinking about, and if you have more, by all means, continue on. But another example I was thinking of is a thunderstorm. So many people, you've got these noise machines and even these apps on your phone. I mean, I remember back when I was still living at home, I would sleep in my room. I worked at Best Buy at the time, so I was all about having an awesome sound system and stuff. And so what I would do when I went to bed at night, I had surround sound and everything in my bedroom, and I would actually use a noise machine app on my phone to get it to play a thunderstorm, and I would play that through the through the surround sound in my room and go to sleep to it because it was just such a calming, soothing, beautiful sound. And even you hear the rolling thunder and you hear the lightning. And what's crazy is these are things that in nature can even be. I mean, a storm can be potentially destructive or whatever, but yet there's kind of an unexplainable objective beauty there that is just, I don't know, there's something calming about it.
Yeah, I don't know. And the same thing with the wolf. You hear howling wolves, like they could be up and be getting ready to get together to go on a hunt.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
But yet it's beautiful. And the elk, I mentioned the elk bugling. That when the elk bugles, they only do it for a couple months a year during the rut. And basically it is this bull elk telling, I'm the big boy, I'm the baddest in town. Don't come around me. I'll take care of you. Or he's telling the cow elks, come over here. Hey, you know what? And come by me. I'll show you. That's what that is. But yet for our ears. It's beautiful. Well, God injects this in there just to put this call out there, uh, to make us think about something deeper, something greater. Um, and in I'm going to get back to Genesis again, because I want to talk about in Genesis 1, when we have this word that's translated good, and God said it was good, and God said it was good, and God, 6 times God said it was good. And the Hebrew word that's being translated good is tob, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's only three letters, T-O-B. So how could you go wrong with T-O-B by calling it tob?
I think the B sounds a little closer to a V in Hebrew, but I'm no expert. So something like that. Tov.
Maybe,
Tov.
you know what? I think it's spelled like that before too. I think I've seen it said tob. Yeah, so it might be tob.
Yeah.
So I was,
you were pretty close.
Anyways, it's like, because I was having a little trouble earlier today, right? But tov or tob, it's used 6 times. And it actually means pleasant, agreeable, and it's an expression of aesthetic delight.
Wow.
Delight. So God said it was good. And when God meant it was good, he was saying, hey, this looks cool. As you take that direct translation, because of how it's translated other times, and it's usually translated that word is placed towards something physically beautiful. Often it's used towards women in the Bible. It's something pleasing to the eyes. But then the final time it's used with the modifier meod, M-E-O-D, is the word, and that's what we translate very, only we turn it around and say very good, and the Hebrew was back the other way. It's good very, which happens a lot in the Romance languages as well, where they put the modifier and the noun in different order. So it means tov meod or meowd, might be the pronunciation of that. Is that meod means muchness or abundance or force. And when it's combined in the translation of very good, it means it really emphasizes all what the word tov was. It's even a very great artistic delight. Invokes feelings of pleasure in people. Now, that combination is only used, I believe, 4 or 5 other times in the Bible, and it's always used for someone's appearance. Bathsheba, this combination is applied to her. So it's kind of like, when you're in high school and that one girl walks into your life and you're just like, it's happened to everybody at one point in her life, or some girl and the guy walks into her life and it's just based on that physical appearance. Or when I'm out on a mountain somewhere out there in the morning taking pictures, and I just look out and I see this vast creation of God, and I just want to go, and it takes your breath away. And that's the word that God was using, the combination, when he said it was very good. So he was in that combination, he's addressing the appearance of it. And it just was something to just, sit back and be in awe. So it's a special kind of powerful beauty. And that's the way God created. You know how your wife looked on your wedding day, and she's coming down the aisle. That's on tov meod, if I'm saying it correctly. You're just like, wow, hey, that's what it is. And that's how God created, just to kind of sit back and, take it all in. And those are the words that are being applied. And as artists, for those of us who are artists, we need to strive for that sense of awe, that we not shock. Too many so-called artists strive for, but more the sense of awe, the sense of to bring out feelings of pleasure in somebody. And when we look at sometimes artwork, we can do that. I've seen work of various artists that kind of did that. I remember when I went to the Museum of Art in New York, MoMA, it's called this it was back then. The acronym for it. And I remember looking at some of those old paintings that were in there, and just like, you see little pictures of them, you can see them on your website or even in a book. But then when you go there and you see this thing is like 10 feet by, 10 feet by 15 feet, and it's on a wall, and it's like, oh my goodness, that thing is you're just taken back by it. And that's what we need to strive for in our arts, whether it's photography, sculpting, or painting, or drawing, because again, we're created in God's image, and part of what we got is created in His image. Again, God's not physical, as I mentioned earlier, so our physical appearance is not the image of God, but there's an imprint on our soul, on our very being, that is what's given us by God, and part of that is our desire to create. Every child is an artist. I heard somebody say that. Read that somewhere, that quote from somebody somewhere. But every child is an artist. They want to create stuff, because it's in all of us. And a lot of us then go on to create with music or with writing, and more with our hands, such as sculpture and painting, and with our eyes as a photographer. And we in us is to strive to create that beauty, because that's how God created us, and to compete with that. So
yeah, that's a great point. That's awesome.
God delights in His work, and we need to create work we're going to delight in.
Yeah, I mean, he created us to kind of attend to His creation. I mean, he created little creators. I mean, we are able to create. We are able to bring things into existence. I mean, in a sense, out of nothing. I mean, we could form an idea in our mind and put it on paper, and it has the potential to be beautiful, just in virtue of who it's being created by. It's amazing, really. It's an amazing thought.
Yes, that he's, because we're in His image, and we're able to create, because he's given us that ability to strive for excellence, and just to want to create that way. And even when we look in the Scripture and other places, I like to look at the nature, but when God created, but when He had the artisans to create the Ark of the Covenant and the tent of meeting, and the decorations and the utensils are in there. They strive for excellence. And even when Solomon was building the temple, that's what they were doing. They were striving for that excellence, and that's how we need to strive for ours. And when God created, we know now how deep the heavens are. The Hubble has taken us farther in, and other looking out there, and there's billions of galaxies. And why did God create all that? And He created, just because simplification, personification, He created it that way just because He wanted to. And when I did a lot of scuba diving years ago, and when I would do that, I would see this tremendous beauty, and I realized that very few people get to go underwater and see that beauty. You get pictures of it, video of it, but that's not the same. It never is. But to go underwater and see these things and experience these things is a special privilege. But why did God create that? Why did God create stars and planets that we'll never see? What? But He did it just out of delight, to simplify it, to personify it, which the Bible often does when it talks about things of the Lord. It simplifies them to our understanding. But even us as artists, I know that many artists are out there. They'll put little things in their painting that no one will ever see. No one will ever pick up on, but it's there. But they do it because that's their pleasure. That's their delight. And that's what God did. Atheists will say, well, why are there 10 billion galaxies for God's delight. Just like, an artist puts little hidden things in their art that, maybe one person, well, look at that, it's cool. I've done slideshows before where I sent them the music and turn them into videos. And there's a message in there that I don't know if anybody's ever going to pick up on, but it's something that I wanted to do. And even people who write music, especially the great musicians of the Renaissance, they wrote these pieces to tell a story. Now, no one knows exactly what was going through their mind, like Mozart, or else he wrote it because he didn't put words to that, but he wrote a story with music, and no one knows exactly what that story was and why he did it that way. And or Beethoven or any of these guys, they all put stories in it, and they all did little things that no one knew why, but they did it because that's what their pleasure was. And we get that from God because that's what God did. When we look at those billions of galaxies, or when we go down in the ocean, there's still things in the oceans we've never seen.
Yeah.
I put them there. So, yeah.
Exactly.
It's all there for delight.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That sounds good. That sounds real good. Well, hey, I mean, what an awesome thought, and what an awesome responsibility to realize that we're created in the image of the Creator, and to get to take those liberties and to get to create things because we think they're beautiful, and it really does, provide beauty. Seems in one sense intangible, kind of in the same way we mentioned John Eldridge earlier. In the same way that desire seems untangible, but yet it's something that calls to us kind of from beyond that which can be easily or immediately experienced. And yet it's such a basic, part of our lives, to see the true beauty in things. So, man, that's absolutely great. That's awesome. Were there any more thoughts about the actual, kind of nature of beauty or anything that you wanted to share? Or, if not, I'd love to talk to you about some of those. We've talked about spiritual metaphors being in creation, and in fact, maybe this is a good time to just transition over there, and you can wrap up any thoughts on beauty you want to, and then as we move over into this. But we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that nature itself kind of provides. When we say beauty, it certainly does, but in a way that beauty speaks to us. And you actually started out by saying that beauty speaks to our heart, it speaks to our minds, it speaks to our souls. And I think that that speaking can almost be taken very literally, in a sense, by some of these metaphors that God has given us in creation. Did you want to share maybe about, I don't know, one or two or three, whatever of those?
Well, in the Bible, it uses, I like to say the Bible often uses nature to tell us something about God, either about his power when it talks about his creation, or it uses them as metaphors. And there's certain ones that I like to think about and look at. One that is on my, because I'm writing this devotional that I've mentioned to you earlier about, it's called Beyond Genesis, and it's experiencing the God of creation beyond the book of Genesis in the Bible. And one thing entry I wrote for that recently was on the Bible calling God a rock. And it calls God a rock the 19 times, I think it is, the total. And David, I think, does it 12 times in the Psalms, calls God a rock. Well, what does that mean? Well, when we think about David, and that's a metaphor. Okay, it's this metaphor because God's not a rock. We know that. He's alive. He's spiritual. But something about a rock can tell us something about God, or what ways is God a rock? And David, Psalm 18, I think in Psalm 22, he says, God is my rock, my fortress, my deliverer. So when we think about the life of David, he spent many of his years being chased by Saul in the Judean wilderness. And I have not been to the Judean wilderness, but I've been to the American Southwest and the desert rock formations there. And when we look at those rock formations, they're huge. They invoke power and strength. Even when I've hiked on them, put your hand on that rock, you feel it's solid. So, and you're standing on it, and it's stable. So God is our rock. He's stable. David in the different nooks in the rocks, and the cracks in the rocks, and the passages in the rocks, he found shelter. He found caves. He found hiding areas from Saul. And a rock is a shelter. It can shelter us from the storm. All we need to do is find that little crevice and just go in that and hide out from a storm. Or there's a lot of things that a rock can do, especially when we stand on a rock. We can stand on that thing, or we get this big view. We climb up and you stand on it. And I'm not talking about your rocks on in your landscaping. I'm talking about the rocks David saw in the desert. There's huge mountainous kind of formations, and that's what we see in the American Southwest, in Utah, and Texas, where I've been there, and in New Mexico, and places like that. These are rocks. And God is my rock. When you look at that, go to the Grand Canyon and think of God as my rock, and you'd be like, oh yeah, or into these places, and it gives you a whole other appreciation about God. Just like anything else in this finite world, in our finite mind, it can't quite explain an infinite God, but it tells us something about him. And so when you think of God as our rock, think of this big thing you could stand on. You could find shelter, and that's solid, that's strong, that's stable. In our mind, it's everlasting when I look at rocks in the desert, but we know they're not. But the same rocks David saw, 3,000 years ago, I could go and see those same rocks. They're still there. Maybe they crumbled a little bit, but really they're still there. And so to our human mind, they're everlasting, and God is everlasting, and he's stable. Another thing we often in the scriptures, it gives us images of mountains to say something about God. Psalm 68:16 talks about the mountain, God's abode. It says, "O mountains with many peaks, at the mountains which God has desired for his abode." So why does God want to live, or in the mountains? Well, what does that tell us about God? Again, mountains are a place we could find sanctuary, but they're so majestic and magnificent. So it's God lives where magnificence is, or God is magnificence. God is majesty. What other better metaphor on earth can we have than this? Think of the Rocky Mountains, if you've ever been there, or even in North Carolina where you live, those mountains there. They're not the same, but they still have a lot of majesty and just awe-inspiring in us. So God is awe-inspiring. And I remember many times just standing on an overlook, looking over the mountains, and just being like, oh, wow. Oh, having that Tov Miod feeling, that very good, this is very good. I want to look at it. So mountains can tell us something about God. And there's many verses in the Bible where mountains are metaphorically used to say something about God. Another one is eagles. Everybody likes Isaiah, where it talks about rising up on wings of eagles. But that's also in other passages. Psalm 103 talks about being renewed like the eagle. There's something about that spiritual metaphor. If you ever seen an eagle fly, just to see it soar. My wife loves bald eagles, and I like bald eagles too, but that's one of her natural nature passions, is bald eagles. And they're quite majestic birds, even when they're not flying.
Yeah.
Even when they're sitting on the ground, they're just like, they look like very regal, like they own the place. And then put them in the air, and they're just, it's beyond. It's like, wow. It's awe-inspiring. There's tells us too that there's something greater than the eagle out there when we just look at it, because the eagle is great, but it inspires us in such a way that there's something greater than the eagle. But going back to the metaphor, the Bible often uses that majesty of the eagle, that strength of the eagle, the flight of the eagle. It says that God took the Israelites out of Egypt on eagle's wings. And forgetting the verse on that, but that's a metaphor, because God's not an eagle, or he covers us with his pinions, his wings, his feathers.
Yeah.
God doesn't have feathers. He's not a big bird, but that's telling us something about how that eagle shelters its young with its wings. I remember seeing a trail cam, or it's not a trail cam, but one of those cameras, webcams they put in an eagle's nest. And there was a picture of this eagle with its chick. And the adult still had blood on its beak from whatever the last meal was. But it's being very tender with the chick. And here's this animal that is powerful and great, yet still tender with its own. And God is obviously powerful and great, but tender with his own. So that's another spiritual metaphor of nature. That's another spiritual metaphor drawn from nature, telling us something about God. He's powerful, he's great, yet he's tender with his own.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's really, and that even just those few examples go to show that nature is just an endless source of discovery. About God. I mean, it's like why one of my favorite things to do is go to science museums. And sadly, when you're there, a lot of times they are a monument to all things anti-God in what they write. But in what they display, you can see God's beauty and splendor all throughout. And it's just like, it always inspires me in that way, towards having a greater appreciation for God as creator, even when I go to the secular science museum, because you get to learn so much about what God has actually created and what God has done in nature. And so, man, I think that's absolutely a wonderful and a worthy thing to do, is to be an explorer of nature and to find ways to understand how God wants to speak to us through the different creatures and formations and beautiful people that he has made. So, man, I really love that. Do you have anything specific you want to share about what it's like to? I mean, you developed a passion, you said, for nature photography. Is there anything about that you want to, speak to? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what you enjoy about it, what you think, why you think others should get into it. I don't know. Anything along those lines?
I think it's a great way to share something of your experience, to capture that beauty. And I would encourage people because I see a lot of, I'm on some Christian photographer sites, and I see a lot of photography that people put out there that, it's not very good. But I would say, take delight in what you're creating. And even though it's not very good, take delight in it. But I would also encourage people to pursue excellence. So if you like photography and you want to display your work, pursue excellence. Just like in any form of art. Sure, you start. Where did I leave the? Michael Hyatt quotes this in one of his books, and I forgot who the actual person who said it is, and it said, "If anything's worth doing, it's worth doing badly." So the point is, it's worth doing and learning and growing in that. And so, yeah, if you can't do it great, start out and do it. Begin your process. Strive for excellence. Don't settle for mediocrity. If you can do better, do better. Learn in photography. learn how to use all those bells and whistles on your camera, your f-stop, your shutter speed, how do I control that? How do I do that effect? How do I create that effect? How do I make water look like it's moving when I take my picture, but then really nice soft look to it? Explore these things, learn these things, because the greater you know, the greater satisfaction you will get. If you get satisfaction out of just taking with your phone with a click, well, how much more satisfaction are you going to get when you really learn how to do it and do it well? It's just like, just like anything else in that area. And there's a lot of, as I mentioned, John Eldridge talked about the book, The Sacred Romance was written by him and a guy named Ben Curtis, who passed away actually shortly after that book was written. But he's talking about the romance, and I experience, the romance of God when I'm out there taking pictures, and it's just a way for him to connect with me through that vehicle, that with the camera, and experience his piece as I photograph that piece of nature. So that's something, and just spending time doing it. Just don't step out of the car and click and go back in the car. Explore, go, do. And as we spend time with it, that's also building the excellence that we're striving for, but it's also taking pleasure in that time, finding peace in that time, discovering what God would have to say to us in that time.
Man, that's some awesome thoughts. Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing that. It's something that a lot of people, myself included, sometimes I don't have the patience for, just because, you can take a pretty nice photo just snapping and clicking with your iPhone real quick. So, they've made it that way. They've made it that way. But I do, I have friends who go beyond that, and they'll go get, really nice cameras and actually really spend some time learning how to use it and get out there and just do it. So I think if you're at all interested in that, Pat just shared some really dynamite advice, I think, for you there to take with you. Pat, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about this. Yeah. And this is going to be, man, this is going to be a great thing for our audience to hear about. And I love your passion. your passion for it is certainly clear, both for the photography and for just seeing this objective beauty in nature. So again, I appreciate that. All right, everyone. Well, I certainly hoped you enjoyed that interview with my buddy Pat. Hey, listen, if you've listened this far, I want to make sure you know that Pat actually has a new devotional book coming out June 6th, which is a Tuesday. And you can find this book. It's called Drawing Near, Meeting God and His Creation. It is a devotional book that helps you get closer to God's creation through his work in photography. And you can go to his site, visualverse.thecreationspeaks.com. And that's where you can interact with Pat and see a lot of his stuff. But also, if you go to that website and then you say /devotional-book, and I'll put the link in the description as well, you can find updates for the book there and all the links to go ahead and pre-order that. Again, it's coming out on June 6th, so pre-order is ready to go, and I would love for you to grab that. It would mean a lot to me, and I know it would mean a lot to Pat as well. God bless everyone. Thank you so much for listening to The Winsome Creationist, and we'll see you next time.